In 2012, a little-known TV and movie performer landed the starring role in the year's most-watched global event. This is the Queen's Stuntman.
Well, good evening. With more than 7 years in the planning, the eyes of the world tonight here on London, with the 2012 Games finally opening. Let's get the thoughts of our guests here tonight. Sky's ceremonial commentator, Alastair Bruce, who's been here.
My name's Alastair Bruce. The London Olympics began on Friday, the 27th of July, 2012.
Any minute, we're going to see the start with the cauldron lighting and the games can begin. And these games...
That night I was on the balcony of the Thistle Hotel, I think it was called, right beside the Tower Bridge. And it was the most electric evening.
And the opening ceremony right now at the Olympic Park in Stratford.
Sky News didn't have permission to be in the amphitheatres itself, so we were watching much of what was fed out on a screen, very much like everybody was at home.
We know there have been rumours about a Bond-type film that's been made for the opening ceremony, so we will keep our eyes on that bridge.
So suddenly in the whole performance, the cameras take us to Buckingham Palace, and James Bond went into the building. I had absolutely no idea that this stunt involving the Queen and a James Bond story was going to take place.
From the Queen to celebrities, sporting...
And I thought, they can't have got a stunt double that looks that good and that like the Queen.
My name's Gary Connery. I was asked to be the stunt double to Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II. James Bond was chaperoning, if you like, the Queen to the Olympics. And the idea being that we arrive via helicopter over the stadium. The two of us jump out, free fall momentarily, open our parachutes, and he delivers her to the opening ceremony.
What essentially this was a stunt by the Queen. I mean, this was something that could go spectacularly right or wrong for everyone involved.
I grew up in Bengio, which is a small town just outside Hertford in Hertfordshire. Whenever people ask me how did I become a stuntman, I always give the flippant answer of I bunked off school lots. But in the UK there is a procedure to get on what's known as the stunt register. It's not for the faint-hearted. I fly wingsuits, I base jump, I kayak, I crash cars, I get hit by cars. I get set on fire. I've doubled for Gary Oldman on the Batman films, John Hurt in Indiana Jones. Anything that you see stunt-wise on television, I'm probably in there at some point. Around October time 2011, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who is a rigger in the TV and film world. And he said to me, Gary, are you available to go to Stratford, East London, for a meeting? And at the time, he didn't tell me what that was. So I arrived at Stratford, 3 Mills Studios. About half an hour had gone by, and there was a crackle over the radio. Danny's on his way to your meeting now. And everybody sort of suddenly adjusted themselves, you know, shoulders back, chest out kind of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, crikey, who is this Danny? Danny Boyle walks in the door. He takes one look at me, he says, Gary. I said, hello, Danny, what are you doing here? I knew Danny from the film The Beach, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Beach.
When Danny Boyle agreed to direct the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, his plan was to showcase the best of British culture. Pillars of life like the monarchy, the NHS, even James Bond, the iconic British spy. It was decided that the centrepiece of the show would take the form of James Bond and the Queen, who was of course set to open the Olympics anyway, both of whom would parachute into the stadium from a helicopter. For this illusion to work, the Queen would need to play herself alongside Daniel Craig as James Bond. In this mini-movie, both would be seen to travel from Buckingham Palace to Stratford via helicopter. This segment would be broadcast to the world, so it was made to look as though the action was unfolding in real time. But at the same time, a second helicopter carrying stunt doubles for the Queen and James Bond would hover out of sight near the stadium. When it came to the critical moment, the jump itself, the action would cut to the stunt doubles leaping into the arena. The whole thing was top secret.
He asked me whether it was possible. And I said, you know, falling and opening a parachute and landing, that's a given, that can be done. But it just depends what else is within that arena.
What essentially this was a stunt by the Queen. She herself had decided to do this, and she was participating in it along with an A-list Hollywood actor, Daniel Craig, who was basically James Bond, this figure of what is known around the world as the great British character in film.
So I was doubling for the Queen, and Mark Sutton was doubling as James Bond. We were using base jumping equipment, so it's essentially jumping from static objects with a parachute. And it's generally much lower altitude than one would skydive. It's a different sort of equipment setup, but they are very good and they work. But also human error can pack the parachute wrong. So it's not like working in TV and film where generally you can call cut and go and do it again. This was a one-off, one attempt in front of, you know, a worldwide audience to get it right. And so that's where the sort of level of fear and the focus and the concentration was at its utmost.
A very good evening. After more than 7 years in the planning, the eyes of the world here on London tonight, the 2012 Games finally opened, and boy...
So we got into the helicopter at Abridge Airfield, which is just north of the stadium, I guess, by maybe 6 or 7 miles. So obviously when one is doubling somebody else, there's a whole costume and makeup team that try to make you look as much like that person as possible.
Angela Kelly has been a personal assistant to the Queen for some years, and she has always known precisely how to dress the Queen well. And there will have been a lot of discussion between Angela Kelly and ultimately the stuntman, who was Gary. And, you know, Gary would have had to spend time with Angela and make sure that what she made for him mirrored exactly what the Queen was going to be wearing herself in order to create the illusion and bring it to as much a sense of reality as possible.
So I had the Queen's dressmaker. She measured me up to have a dress made that could also incorporate the straps of the parachute. So I was wearing flat shoes. I think I had some tights on, looked very good. This peach salmon dress, which was beautiful. A big costume ring, a big diamond. I had one of the Queen's personal handbags, apparently, so I'm told. I was wearing a wig and, of course, my Union flag parachute.
I was hugely surprised that the Queen had decided to do this, and I expect the Queen would have wanted to know what the risks were to her reputation and profile.
If Mark and I had decided we can't do this, even to the second, there was a button that they press in the control room which goes to another pre-recorded piece to basically end the sequence. And I don't know what that was. Maybe they pre-recorded a helicopter then banking away and landing, and then the Queen gets revealed again. I have no idea.
Let's get the thoughts of our guests here tonight. Sky's ceremonial commentator, Alastair Bruce.
Sometimes an event can really bring the whole country together, and over 70 days, by passing this very simple
We took off about 40 minutes before we were due overhead.
We know there have been rumours about a Bond-type film that's been made for the opening ceremony, so we will keep our eyes...
The flight from the airfield to the stadium was actually very short because we weren't that far north of where the stadium was, but they did want us up early so that we were ready and in place and prepared. Our jump would time in with that pre-recorded stuff.
So suddenly in the whole performance, the cameras take us to Buckingham Palace. And we went up the stairs and James Bond went into the building. And then he went into the room and there she was. It was undeniably the Queen. This is a pre-record, but it's made to look like it's happening in real time. From that moment, the whole brilliance of the concept started to grasp us. Of course, she goes with the corgis. And we only saw her feet going into the helicopter. We didn't know where it was going.
We were hovering outside the stadium. They were playing the pre-record on the screens within the stadium.
Everyone watching to see if the UK can put on a show to wow the world. Even James Bond.
We could see those screens from in the helicopter.
And then the helicopter took off, and then it passed certain significant points on London's skyline. Then it went underneath the great traverse arch of the Tower Bridge.
And this certainly is Danny Boyle, the film director, at work here, knowing what works visually.
Oh, definitely. And I think that throughout...
We got the
his
call
vision,
a minute
he
overhead,
saw-
and absolutely everything ramps up again at that point. It was dark everywhere, the lighting was phenomenal. People, they had these paddles that they held. Every seat had a sort of lighting paddle, and so they could hold that up, and you know, the computer systems would then light all those paddles up. It was just phenomenal. So we were at 750 feet. The towers of the stadium are 210 feet, so that gave us 540 feet to jump out, free fall, open our parachutes, spiral a little bit, and then get away from the stadium to then be able to land just outside the stadium. So this was going to happen. We were going to jump into the opening ceremony of the Olympics. For all of our rehearsals, we'd had a countdown from 10 so that it timed out with the pre-record.
And of course, this amazing moment when the door opened and James Bond said, "Are you ready, Your Majesty?"
I remember turning and saying to Mark, "We're going."
And the sort of gasp of everybody.
We could hear the Bond theme tune being played out. You know, da-da, 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 da. That kicked in. Your awarenesses are so heightened. You wouldn't hear the blades whap, whap, whapping. And they're literally feet above you. But you'd hear the bells on the toes of fairies dancing 700 feet below. I remember the parachute opening. That's always a good feeling. I remember then spiralling round to my left and looking back and seeing Mark, and we sort of caught one another's eye and we were screaming at each other. It was great. Then it was all about basically clearing the sides of the stadium to get out over the towers and all of the cables and lines and everything that was there. And because of the wind direction, we had to approach over the water and then get to land on quite a narrow bridge. It made much more sense for us to land outside of the stadium, which also meant then it was easier to reveal the Queen coming into the stadium.
The best of British. That was tremendous, because the rumours have been flying around here for several hours that something like that was going to happen.
Well, they always have a list of when...
By the time I came out into the stadium and sat with my wife, essentially it was already over from a spectacle perspective, but then the athletes were walking rounds for them to have their moments too. It's nice to remain anonymous. This, for me, fantastic as it was still just another job. The best job I've ever had, I hasten to add, but it was another job.
For the United Kingdom, that was one of the great worldwide events that we were able to host. And I suppose the Palace were delighted because in the end it went well. There was a risk, but the risk was worth taking because it was worth taking for the success of the London Olympics 2012. Danny Boyle pulled it off and it led to a great fortnight of fabulous athletics and all forms of sport.
The Queen hasn't taken it upon herself to invite me around for tea and cakes yet, but I do know where she lives, so I might go and knock on her door at some point.
In 2013, Mark Sutton, who played James Bond's double on the night of the opening ceremony, died following a parachute stunt accident involving a wingsuit in Switzerland. Gary Connery continues to work in the industry. The Queen's Stuntman was recorded by Tom Gillespie, writing, production and sound design by Rob Mulhern. For more information, go to skynews.com/StoryCast21. Next time.
The so-called Year 2000 computer bug has generated fears that anything from nuclear missiles to interbank trading systems could fail when 1999 turns into the year 2000.